Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Just going to give it another minute for everybody to join, but welcome to the webinar. Hi, Bart. As I mentioned before, for everyone who's joining, thanks everyone for joining. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes for everybody to get situated, and then we'll get started with the webinar. Hi, everyone who just joined. Like I mentioned before, just going to give it a couple more minutes and get situated, get your drinks, get some water, and we'll get started in just in a minute more. All right, so I believe that the majority has joined, so let's go ahead and start. So hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Lars, and I would like to start with a short introduction of me and my colleague, and then we can get started. So who am I? I'm Lars. I'm a solution architect at GitLab, and I've been at GitLab now for about a year now. Based out of Hamburg, originally actually from Belgium, and I am supporting our customers and prospects in the Benelux region. Before I started at GitLab, I was actually working at various hyperscalers, and there I was working with large global organizations, but also mid-market, and at the end even with startups, and how I like to call them cloud natives. So you can say I have experience with basically organizations that just started in their DevOps journey, but also the ones that were born in it. I helped customers set up their first Kubernetes clusters, but I also had other customers that was basically helping them manage their thousands of clusters and microservices out there. Let me hand off to Christoph, who can also introduce himself, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, thanks, Lars. So I'm Christoph Goossens, so the left side of the picture, essentially. So I'm also one of the solution architects for the EMEA region, together with Lars. Today, the goal is essentially that we have a nice interactive session. Where am I coming from? So I've got around 10-year-ish experience around DevOps, enterprise DevOps, or whatever you want to call it, in pre-sales, and way more that I want to admit as experience in essentially software development life cycles in general. I'm still in Belgium, still based in Belgium. However, I'm one of the very few Belgians who doesn't like to drink beer. Potentially, that's the first, well, astonishing statement of the day, essentially. Nice to meet you all.
That's why I left Belgium.
It might be more beer for you, Lars.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Cool. So next slide here is basically why are we here? So today, we of course want to keep this as interactive as possible. This is a webinar for you guys. So we of course want to help you answer any of your questions that you have. So the first thing would be there. We have a Q&A section. We have a chat. We would prefer if you would use the Q&A section, though. For any of your questions that you have during the session, you can interrupt us. You can basically ask whenever you would like to ask a question, and we can then pick them up from there. But, why are we here? What are we going to talk about? Of course, DevOps, and maybe, any of the questions you might have there, we can answer. What do you think, Christoph?
Yeah, that's well, a nice summary. I would say this is something completely new as a format for us as well, or at least for me, and I think for Lars as well. So we might be iterating a couple of times over the way how we do this, as with everything that we do at GitLab. So as mentioned by Lars, feel free to essentially raise any type of questions that you might have in the Q&A. We try, because GitLab is a very broad platform, we try to focus on DevSecOps, so security, but also DevOps as a platform. If any other questions arise, then we will try to answer it anyway, or essentially take it as a follow-up later on.
Yeah, sounds really good, Christoph. And basically, maybe we can start with a small little exercise here. If everybody in the chat wants to write down what they find in DevSecOps, what they basically think, or if they're already implementing it, what did they believe is basically DevOps, and what is DevSecOps for them? What it actually means for you, and what are you hoping to get out of the seminar today? So if you would like to write that in the chat, then we can quickly go through that, and else we'll just go on with some more slides that we have.
In the meantime, I'll start by saying that we don't have a lot of slides, so don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. That's also the thing here. As we mentioned, we want to keep it, of course, very interactive. Slides don't help with interactivity. It creates monologues. So we just want to basically keep a couple of speaking topics that we want to bring up. But it's definitely something that you want to keep in mind as well. Ask any questions you have, or even if you think that what we're saying is incorrect, or if you want to correct us, or if you have another opinion, please do share with us. We would love to hear your thoughts and basically, yeah, hear what you have to say. So, okay, cool. Implement security at an early cycle. That's definitely something that we'll touch about a little bit today. Scan code for vulnerabilities. Yes, scan container images for sure. Vulnerabilities, provide best practices on project. Yeah, that's definitely some part of it. Ensure that code is released has the least amount of vulnerabilities. To be honest, we want to have code that's released that has 0 vulnerabilities, right? I think that's the goal for everyone. So for sure. Thank you everyone for sharing here. Usage of tools should be easy and intuitive. That is definitely very important. And this is also what we believe for us in having that single platform where you have no tools, you have a tool. And basically, we will talk about that a little bit as well. Maintaining credential security in pipelines, deployment, scan container imaging, managing deployment access. Yes, also that. All of those things, very important. Also make sure that the ones that have access to the pipelines are the people that should have access to the pipelines. Automated, yes, everything should be automated. That's definitely, I think, it would be one of the main points, right? Christoph, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say everybody is answering in the same direction, which is hopefully the right direction. Well, at least, spoiler, it is the right direction.
Good.
What about some trouble that you might have? Is it as easy as just saying, well, introduce security and we have DevSecOps, or are we struggling with anything?
Yeah, maybe that's a good question as well. Yeah. So what are you struggling with? What are currently your worries within your DevOps journey? Would love to hear that as well. It's not priority for developers. Okay. I would disagree, but sure. I don't know, Christoph, what do you say?
It depends.
There we go.
Yeah, it's the first of the day, probably not
exactly.
the last of the day.
We should put a counter. Right? Let's put a counter. It depends counter.
Yeah, I would say I can agree to a certain extent, that the developers should be spending time more on developing and adding more value to your end customers.
Yeah.
But I think it's Bart who also mentioned that it should be automated. So my guess is linking those two is that it should happen automatically.
Yeah.
You should get the feedback and not pay attention on I can't forget to run these type of scans.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I think the tool should be basically there to enable the developers and make it basically that they don't have to worry about it. It should still be a priority though, even for the developers, but it should definitely not be something that blocks them or basically sits in their way. It should be part of the platform and just with every commit that basically happens, right? That's how I see that. Yeah. And implementing DevOps for legacy projects, that is definitely something interesting as well. We can definitely touch about that at some point. Identifying the best tool for scanning. That's something we can help with because we actually have a suite of scans or tools that we can provide for you there. SAS delivered a lot of false positives, time needed for evaluation. That's true. It does happen with false positives, but it is, of course, then important to basically set up your rule sets, right? So it's something that we can work around and basically, but I totally agree. There can be some time needed for evaluation of those vulnerabilities. Best way to implement continuous scanning for Kubernetes clusters. So I'm not sure if you are aware of it, but we actually have a Kubernetes agent that can do that for you. Definitely something that we can talk about deeper as well in the webinar. And how to keep track of application security in production. So that's basically also a really good topic. Christoph, basically, what do you see with our customers and our prospects? Like how do we basically keep our production applications secure?
Yeah, so as with everything, as always, I'll call it that. It's depending on the customer, because we have a lot of customers who actually have more security in production and scanning that in production already, because that's still typically or traditionally part of the security teams that follow that security pattern already. But we want to achieve a situation where we don't have to start over again. That's what we see a lot in a typical, let's call it more waterfall-based workflow, where shifting left of security isn't implemented yet, is that if you have security at the very beginning, it's completely something different as what is running in production. And having a collaboration there, which is essentially what DevOps is doing, having more collaboration and having a joint responsibility for running what is running in production. Yeah, that's also something that needs to be addressed.
Right, definitely. I agree. Like breaking down those silos and have those cross-functional teams work together. And basically, we're all in the same team, right? So we're all trying to do the same or achieve the same thing, which is prevent any vulnerabilities in production from getting there at all. So definitely agree there. Cool.
Right. I like the last one, security by obscurity or not. I would say, well, that's how I handle security at home, by not having anything aligned. Obscurity can help out to make it harder, essentially, to find out what is connected to what. And so once somebody still gets into the network or into your environment, it's harder to map out what can be done. However, I think one of the topics that we will see a lot lately is AI, machine learning, and etc. Meaning that kind of automation can help also the attackers there. So obscurity becomes more frustrating for the people who need to maintain it versus keeping away the attackers, because let's face it, unfortunately, they are also automating a lot of these things.
No. Next week, GPT, please hack here left this application, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, the the technology is there at least.
Yeah, for sure. And we also see this, right? We're seeing as well an increase in automation. So people are using more and more automation. We saw that in our DevSecOps survey for last year. But we're also seeing teams that are starting to use more and more AI tools. So actually tools that will help you identify vulnerabilities in your application way sooner. And we definitely see an uptick there. So we see people using more tooling there than before, because automation is very important, but automation can sometimes also be slow. Meaning that if all the tests have to run and they have to do a full scan on the full application, your pipelines might actually start taking more and more time, which can be negative as well, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And there are ways to optimize that, of course, by leveraging new kinds of technology. Again, AI and machine learning can help out trying to identify the priority of things, and so that the fail fast mechanism is still applies, so that if something fails, typically it's going to be something that was just touched on or changed, that has the highest probability of changing. If you can implement that into your pipeline, it means that your pipeline fails faster, which means that you can save on resources, time and resources, so you can start working on fixing it versus waiting until everything has been definitely completed.
That's a really good point as well. Like, I think we should never forget that iteration is something that we can apply on everything, including our pipelines. So we should not have a pipeline that we create and set and forget. It's definitely, there's always some potential to optimize our pipelines and basically make it more efficient, or, add more tools, add more thoughts, add more things to it. But at the same time, don't forget, everything you add will have a cost as well. Great. I had a cool question.
I think yeah, go ahead.
So he basically asks or has a pain point regarding regular rescanning of existing images. I've had that question a couple of times, and I basically wonder how you see this, Christoph. Like, we see that in many of our customers, basically they have a platform set up, or they have their project set up, they build their images, but sometimes there's also a project that basically ends up in, let's say legacy. It's been used, it's been developed, we have an image there, but then it's not touched for maybe months or weeks. What do you see there? Like, how would you think that we approach that?
So typically when we start talking about DevSecOps, we talk about the software development lifecycle and the daily activities where we trigger our scans. However, very rightfully so, sometimes you have applications that are in maintenance mode, that are still up and running in in production, because there's no additional functionality needed, or for all the right reasons, or you might be building something completely different, which will very soon be replacing it. You need to rescan those running applications, and potentially, because Sergey is talking about the images itself, which is typically in your registry somewhere. You need to do that because of updates on vulnerabilities that were found. The prime example, I'll call it like that, is Log4j. We have been running for Log4j. It's all fixed by now, hopefully. No, so we have been running a vulnerable version of Log4j for years, but we weren't aware that it was vulnerable until somebody found that vulnerability. That meant the application did not change, but your database of capabilities of scanning changed. And so for that reason, we do need to have a way of scanning existing images, both running into production, because it's not only whenever before the deployment and scanning everything there and then deploy it. Also, after deployment, you need to be able to validate what is running inside of your Kubernetes clusters or environments in general.
Yeah.
Now, that said, I know for our roadmap, which is completely open available, because we don't have a curated roadmap, we just have our epics and issues that you can collaborate on. Our roadmap has essentially a functionality that is coming that automatically allows you to rescan images in your registry on a regular basis. So that is coming. For now, what most of our customers are doing, is setting up scheduled pipelines.
Yeah.
Because you can leverage the same functionality that you have on with the day-to-day activities on a regular basis.
Yeah, for sure. I see that as well. And what my customers then add to that is they use specific variables in their scheduled pipeline. So you can actually differentiate between a scheduled pipeline where you potentially only want to scan your images. You don't want to run through the full build process to, again, save cost, be efficient, but still give you that flexibility to have that regular scan happening on those images. And not to forget, we also still have, here you're talking about images, of course, but if we're not talking about images, but about your libraries, we have our dependency list. So once you have your dependency list there, it's always very easy with advanced search to get a quick query on which packages are we using where. So if another Log4j happens, please don't happen. We have a quick way to basically identify at least the projects or the libraries that are being used somewhere in our organization.
Yeah, that's a very good point. With our search capabilities, you can do that at the moment already. However, we have got some feedback, again, full transparency, that it can be easier to do that. And so we are, well, I don't know when it's going to be released because I'm not the product manager for that. And I don't decide that. Because if it's up to me, it's going to be tomorrow, and everything is being released tomorrow, which is impossible to do. But we are changing the interface of that dependencies of those vulnerabilities in general, so they can more easily, reverse engineer essentially where a vulnerability is. So again, I know you don't like to talk about it, Lars, but Log4j example, whenever something like that occurs, one of the questions that you will get within your organization is which of our applications is using a vulnerable version of Log4j. That reverse way of looking is coming hopefully soon in a GitLab instance near you.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something I'm looking forward to, not Log4j or the next Log4j, but definitely that functionality. It's going to make it a lot easier to, if it happens, to basically remediate it in a quicker way. Cool.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not going to be if it happens, but rather when it's happening.
Yeah, that's unfortunately the thing, right? No, yeah. Unfortunately or fortunate, I don't know. It's, to be honest, I love the fact that we have those projects that basically do look for vulnerabilities in applications, because in the end, what we all want is a secure environment, right? Having our applications be as secure as possible. Yeah, I think that's still a good thing, even though it means sleepless nights. Thank you. Thank you for that, Crystal.
Welcome.
Okay, so Leon, you had a question here that is a little bit to a different direction, where you asked how do we go about sharing knowledge and our understanding. I quickly want to touch on that. So basically, Christoph mentioned it a couple of times as well. We have a public roadmap. We are very transparent about how we do things, and that's how we basically work. So we, and GitLab itself, we are what we call handbook first. So we have, I don't know if you're familiar with it, our handbook is hosted, it's a website that you can basically look into, and the majority of our things that we do, even how, for example, our different departments work, how support works, how our processes work, that information is all there. Everything is documented in a very large, you can call it a wiki. Basically, it's just documentation. And you can see it there, and including our roadmaps. So Christoph just shared a link there that can help you. So we call it the product direction. And you can see our different views. We have our, I think, 3-year or 10-year views that are posted in there. And then you can go deep into the different stages. So you see on the slide as well. So we have our stages for build, code, plan, et cetera, et cetera. Those stages we split up during in the direction page there. And you can get more details about the different features that are there. If you, for example, are looking for something more specific there. Good question. Part. So do different branching strategies impact the way you implement DevSecOps? It could, and again, it depends, right? So how I see it is that depending on how you build your branching strategies, if you're going in the direction of environment branches, for example, it doesn't immediately have to change, because in the way, and you will hear there's a couple of times, which is what we call shift left. So we basically want the security tests and the tests itself regarding your pipelines to happen on each commit. That means on each feature branch that you're developing on, each commit that you're doing, we want the full test suite to basically be run on. That means that when you work then with specific environment branches, like your staging or production branches, you could actually still do, or we will do the scans there again, and you actually have the scans running on each of those different branches. So it doesn't immediately have to affect, but maybe Christoph, you have a different opinion about that.
Oh, you said it. It depends
Yeah.
on how you're working, because suppose you're going for a GitOps way of working, then the branching model can be different. True there as well, because you're not, well, if first of all, one step back, if we're talking about GitOps, typically it's pool-based GitOps. I mean, yeah, thanks Bart for keeping track of the, it depends. With pool-based GitOps, you have an agent like our own Kubernetes agent, well, GitLab agent for Kubernetes, or Flux CD, for instance, might be doing that, where you're looking at a specific branch and pull in those changes automatically. That also means you're not able to trigger immediately from that same way of working the scans that go along with it, unless you have a CI/CD system that is built in, like for us, because then the deployment itself will be independent of the pipeline that you are running, and so you can still have the same branching strategy there. However, well, it's potentially not the debate that we should have now, essentially, but the trunk-based versus working with merge requests. That's all of that will be potentially changed.
Yeah, good.
So that's the downside of having a full platform, is that you will have to be able to support everybody and everybody's choices. Yeah, but it also means that I can't just tell you, well, this is the way how you have to do it, period, and we don't support anything else. Yeah, that would mean we're too restrictive.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's also the way that we like to do things, right? Like just to give an example, when it comes to security scans, you can integrate any security scan with GitLab and it will look like a native scan. So for us, like I mentioned before, we want to enable whoever is using our platform. If they're using a security scanner, or if they already chose a security scanner that they're happy with, instead of getting rid of that security scanner, integrate it, get that information inside of the platform, and then still use all of the benefits that you have on top of it. Basically, being able to see everything you need in that single place.
Great. Just to come back to Leon's question for a moment, so around knowledge sharing and understanding. It's a difficult topic because it's, sorry, strike three. It depends on your application. For GitLab itself, for instance, we have the luxury to have a single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, which means we only have one application to deliver, which is not always the case in most of the organizations. It means for us, we can easily have all the documentation that we need in the same documentation. Versus if you have multiple applications that you need to support, you need to have like more a hierarchy or a linking mechanism between those documentations. Now we do support, for instance, wiki functionalities, but we see a lot of our customers not using that wiki functionality because the wiki is based on a Git repository, and they prefer actually to have, well, more control over how they display their data, essentially. Yeah. And that's how we are doing it with actually both our documentation and our handbook. Is we generate a pages website, so static website based on information that we're getting from the different repositories. Yeah. And I believe that's something that scales better than a wiki, but it's completely depending on the.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. So most of my customers are actually using Pages. because they love to use things like Jekyll or Hugo or any of those basically template engines that you can quickly get marked down and put it in a repository, have everybody collaborate, write the documentation as they see fit. And with a single click, you can then deploy your latest documentation in a single location. And with Pages, then either use it hosted on Pages, hosted on S3 bucket, hosted wherever you want, basically, it doesn't matter. But if you're using it with Pages, you can then also just still lock it down. So if you wanted to use Pages and only want internal documentation, for example, you could do that as well.
Cool. Yeah, and that's essentially the full flow that we are doing. So we have everything, well, for lack of better terms, internal processes is in our handbook. It's not really internal because it's public to the world, but anyway, everything with regards to the application itself is in the documentation. And because everything can become a bit overwhelming, we do have blog posts that actually are also generated in the same way than our handbook is generated, which means that we can easily guide and inform our customers of what is now coming. And because of the speed of releases, because we just had another release 3 days ago, we now have something called quarterly releases, so an overview of what is happened the last quarter, because otherwise it might become overkill. But again, that's very specific to how GitLab is doing it, but we can potentially leverage from a couple of those ideas internally as well.
Cool. I'm trying to understand Bart's question there. Maybe you can help, Christoph. Is GitLab working on a better level of code scanning as the GitLab code scan versus SonarQube code scans, as we to have one set central tool?
Well, so first of all, what I can say, I'm guessing that it's the majority of the code scans that you're referring to, Bart. We are iterating on constantly on increasing the quality there. What we are trying to achieve is to get a standard way of scanning code across the different programming languages, because code scanning depends on the language that you're using. And we try to do that by combining the open source scanners that are available, typically the scanners that come with the language itself, and build others on top of that ourselves. I believe we are building a new scanner, which is going to be a proprietary scanner, but I didn't see a lot of information yet, so I'll need to look at the docs myself to see how far we are against that. What we typically do is work with our customers to see what the functionality is that you're looking for. For SonarQube, for instance, we do have an integration with SonarQube, and it might make sense for some of your requirements to just integrate with SonarQube and then let it pick up the scans and the results in the exact same way as our own results, which means that you have still a streamlined way of providing that information back to the developers. What we try to avoid, and what you unfortunately see with multiple of our customers, well, before they were our customers, I should say, is that they have the best in breed of security tools that are never used, or that they are only used for a small subset of their applications, which is unfortunate because you're spending a lot of money on those tools. They should be used. And by having like an automated way, and that's coming back to, I believe, your own point, Bart, that needs to be automated and not the developer's problem to scan. Having that framework around security scans, getting from vulnerability, and having a single source of truth around it, that's where GitLab helps as well.
Yeah, and what I wanted to add as well is regarding the scanner that what Christoph basically mentioned. So to give you an example, the DOS scanner, we still have a DOS scanner that's based on OWASP ZAP proxy, ZAP proxy, or ZA proxy, sorry. Yeah. We basically replaced that with our own browser-based scanner now. And we see that, for example, the speed and the efficiency of that scanner is X times way faster than what OWASP could do. Plus, it has some other functionality. We want to, at some point, replace the OWASP proxy completely. We want to basically make it on par and then add more tests to it to basically, as you mentioned, of course, stay in the market and make sure that we can offer a full suite of scans for everyone to use. And yeah, you also mentioned about those many tools. So maybe I can go to the next slide, Christoph, and we can talk a little bit about those 2-3 tools that we see sometimes our customers that are using. Maybe a question for the audience. How many tools roughly counted are you currently using for your DevOps workflow? We see, for example, with our customers in average that they have at least 6 to 7 tools. So I'm a bit curious how many tools everybody is using at the moment. And if you say 1, then I know which one it is.
You hope, you know.
No. 6, okay, 5 or 6. That's pretty close to the 4. Getting better. 7. Dear, I'm so sorry. 3, yeah, pretty good.
Oh, actually 7 is still okay. Yeah,
yeah, everything is okay, but 7 is still a lot more than
1. Yeah, that's true.
Well, that's what I mean, right?
Yeah,
still a lot more than 1. 5, I believe. Okay, cool. Also 5. Yeah.
And so just to be curious, what tools are you considering in those 5 or 7 tools? Are we talking about the security tools or the entire DevSecOps lifecycle? We'll take, yeah. All right, okay.
Okay, entire lifecycle. So also things like deployment and everything like that. Yeah, good.
So I think that Bart is already closer to
well, 6 tools
consolidation.
Yeah, that's not bad. 7 complete pipeline, including deployment. Okay, then 7 is definitely not as high as I thought.
Yeah, that's essentially what we see a lot with our customers, especially if you go to enterprise grade customers and you take into account the entire organization, not by team, but the entire organization. Sometimes you end up with hundreds of tools, sometimes even multiple licensed tools the same time, the same tool multiple times licensed, essentially what is unfortunate.
Yeah.
Especially because it has a lot of implications.
Yeah.
And so if you're working with multiple tools, are they all aligned with each other? Are they all linked with each other, or are they hopefully loosely coupled?
Yeah,
or not coupled?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm also curious to know, like, do you integrate all of these tools that you're currently using, or are they all just set up and basically everybody uses what they think they need, but in the end, the information is not flowing basically to a central location? So that's something that I'm definitely seeing with some of my customers or some of my prospects, that we come into the conversation and then they're using all these tools. But what happens is the security team has access to the security scans and they can see what vulnerabilities have been found. The developers have absolutely no clue. And as you then mentioned before, one of the attendees said, it's not the priority of the developers. Totally agree. It should not be the priority of the developers, but if the developer doesn't know, then how can they fix it, right? How can they basically know that things are happening in their application, that they don't have access to the security scans for? They don't have access to the tooling. They're basically building hard silos between different departments, and it just becomes very difficult to help or to work around it. You can then pay lots of licenses for the application, but if the information never flows back to the developers, what can we do then, right?
Yeah, sorry, I was reading the answers. So it sounds like, for instance, Marcus here, a lot of self-development integration. That sounds to me like phase 3 of DevOps, which is essentially what we are calling, well, actually, what is highlighted here is DIY DevOps, so do-it-yourself DevOps. So, and that's what we see a lot, based on how long you're already working in DevOps. I'll call it this like that. it typically starts with what we call bring your own approach, which means a team starts working with DevOps, and you require some tools. You require some source code management, your CI system, along the way that you go and you grow, you add more tools, but they're still not coupled together. That's more the DIY, the bring your own DevOps. Then companies tend to switch towards best-in-class DevOps, which means you want to avoid having multiple systems that do the same thing, like source code management, can GitHub, GitLab, SVN, even if you're not in Bitbucket, everything is there, which is what makes it harder essentially to reallocate the people from one team to another, because you have to start learning again. Yeah. And so best in class means, well, let's choose across the organization one tool for the job essentially, for each of these capabilities, which makes it easier already. If you want to work together, you can do things like import and export, but it's still not coupled together. Then you're getting frustrated typically, or I get frustrated at that point, because, well, we're both using Jira. Why don't we connect the dots? Because I want to just point to you and say, well, I'm depending on you, so please do this task for me and report back into my application. When it's within Jira, it's okay, but when you want to connect the dots between your SEM system, your issue management system, your security systems, everything, you have to start connecting the dots yourself. And that's what I believe Marcus is talking about, that integration needs to be built on your own, which means you're going to spend a lot of time and effort maintaining that. That's still another topic.
Yeah, this is a really good point that Marcus also says, like, most of the time it's actually not the best tool, it's the tool that's there. And I see that a lot with most of my customers, where we come in and they're using a specific tool and you think like, oh, great, you're using that. We can then help you basically how that could look like on the GitLab side, or basically how we can improve it. And then halfway the conversation is, oh yeah, but we also have that, and we also still have that, and we also still have that. And you go, okay, why? Because it was there. Somebody at some point decided that this was the tools that they use, or of course, everybody has the freedom to choose, right? And one of the phases in DevOps is also that every team individually decides a tool set that they're going to use. So some are using Jenkins, the others are using Circle CI for their CI. Everybody basically chooses what they want, and then there is just no communication between teams at all, no sharing of knowledge as well. Coming back to the point that we had before, there won't be any sharing of knowledge because nobody has access or can see basically what the other teams are doing. This makes it a bit more difficult, right?
Yeah, totally agree. And that's probably why people try to go to phase 4, which is the DevOps platform. Well, a bit biased, of course, because we have the one DevOps platform. Yeah, there you go. However, when asking, I think more than 3,000 or 4,000 people in our global DevSecOps survey, 70% of them indicated that they're either already working like that or want to start moving towards a single platform, or essentially, well, you're highlighting in the slides in here. So insights, better transparency, but keeping it also things like keeping it simple. You don't want to have the complexity of when working together and you want to start discussing a problem to ask, well, actually, where did you get your information from? Which tool do I need to log into to get that latest information? And then find out that unfortunately, since you just joined the team or you swapped teams, that you don't have access to that yet, or the wrong kind of access yet. For sure. So those kind of things seems like, well, obvious potentially, and small problems, but it has an impact on your efficiency. Because if you need to wait until somebody gives you access to the right project, then you're going to assume that you never have the right information, and you're going to start confirming that information over and over again with multiple people, potentially causing confusion in between because you don't have access to the same information. If you have a single platform, or at least a way to have a way to aggregate that information and in a single source of truth, then you can start working on the problem versus trying to get access to the information before starting to work on a problem.
I think it also
makes sense.
It definitely makes sense. And I think also one of the things that is even very important there is having an up-to-date single source of truth. Because I do see that some of my organizations, they build their own dashboards and they have those integrations, but those integrations are not always up to date. So a security scan has ran, but that information is not yet there. Having that quick feedback loop, that very short feedback loop, getting all that information immediately in front of the developer, basically makes that in the whiff, they know what exactly the status is of their current merge request that they're working on, for example. So definitely something that that helps there as well, having up-to-date information that can be trusted, so you can actually know that this information is accurate and it's updated immediately.
I agree, and also indirectly, it has an impact on your business because it's also one of the feedbacks that we got from the survey. One of the things that a lot of companies are struggling with is hiring, because they get funding potentially. If you're in a startup or a scale up like ourselves, we get funding to grow faster, and you want to triple or quadruple your revenue. But the biggest bottleneck typically is getting those engineers. The engineers that you want to hire. Everybody wants to hire those engineers. Well, hopefully, at least. And so filling up those hiring slots is very hard. At the same time, you're using a lot of smart engineers to keep essentially your tool chain up to date and to integrate everything. Because a simple thing like upgrading Jenkins, for instance, upgrading Jenkins. If I do a demo of upgrading Jenkins, I don't do that anymore for obvious reasons, but if I do that, it's very easy. You go in, you click up update, you're done, essentially. But that's not realistic. If in a real world situation, you have a lot of plugins there, you have other integrations there, and you need to validate whether all of those components are compatible. And then we're still talking about one component in the chain. If you have, even it's only the 4 or 5 tools that need to be integrated, you need to make sure that if upgrading like Jenkins doesn't break your connection towards, I don't know, Jira or GitHub or whatever it might be, which means that a simple thing or something that should be simple as making an upgrade work becomes a project that you need to prepare for, that you need to do a couple of times before you actually can do it in your production tool chain.
And then hoping that you have one Jenkins instance, right? Not that other customer I had a couple of weeks ago, they had 100. Then even if it is a single click, you still need that one person that goes in and clicks 100 times to update their environment, right? So definitely, and even if it is just one instance, you still need that person to go in and click on that button. He could be doing something more efficient, like, grabbing a cup of coffee.
Yep, exactly. Where I've got one of my customers who could liberate 16 engineers just because they can consolidate down on GitLab. That's a huge cost reduction for them, and it goes both ways. It's a cost reduction because you have less people involved in just running the tools, and you can leverage those people to actually build some added value to their customers, which means that, essentially the revenue hopefully goes up. It depends on what you're doing, of course, and you never know. but at least you have more people thinking about the problem, or you can have more functionality being developed in parallel.
And to be honest,
it really has a big business impact in that way as well.
And as an engineer, to be honest, I would also be more happy to write cool stuff and make new products than clicking on buttons in Jenkins to make it update. But that's just my personal opinion there.
Been there, done that. Unfortunately.
Been there, done that. Exactly.
Yeah.
Cool.
Didn't get the t-shirt yet.
Sorry?
I didn't get the t-shirt yet.
You didn't get the t-shirt yet? Ah.
Yeah. Been there, done that. Got the t-shirt typically, but no, not on that.
But
It depends. I
where's
got the
your
t-shirt.
where is your it depends t-shirt though? That we needed
Yeah,
to put the markers on.
not today.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's well, Jan. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. So does GitLab have any advantages over the Azure DevOps? The most commercial way of answering would be yes, of course, it has it has advantages. The main, well, the more realistic answer would be it depends on your use cases, because as with everything, and I mentioned that with the security tools before, if you buy or you decide to go with any type of tool, as long as you're using it, then it's useful for you. And so that goes the same with GitLab. It's typically useful, but if you have the right requirements, GitLab might not be the fit, and that's also something that we need to be honest about, and that's part of the full transparency, which is one of the core values.
That's I think it's a very good point there, Christoph, because in the end, we want people that use the product to also get the most out of it. So if it's a good fit, that's why we're here. We help you with understanding if it is a good fit, and if not, so be it. We're here to help you understand and make the right decision. It does not make sense if the product doesn't fit. Then why would you use it?
Exactly. And as usual, the DevOps, the devil is in the details.
The DevOps is also in the details. Yeah, very good.
Especially because security tools, it's very hard to compare security tools. Because sometimes you can start staring yourself on the capabilities, and every vendor has a list of capabilities. We'll look at this. And if you compare it with another tool, we will always have more checkboxes than the other vendor, because, well, hey, that's, sorry, Lennon, but it's marketing.
Yeah, exactly.
The main difference with our comparisons is that you can edit the page. At the bottom of each page, you can edit it, submit a merge request if you don't agree. And if it's correct and not just, well, your tool sucks, that's not really that relevant. If it's actually relevant, we will discuss on it. If it's relevant, it will be added to our comparison. The reason for that is, if we don't know, we can't change it, essentially. So we're asking all our customers for feedback, customers/community members in general, because we do have an open source product that can be used on in multiple ways. And that's essentially why we don't have a roadmap. I mentioned it and I shared the link for the direction page. If you keep on clicking, you end up with the epics and the user stories or the issues that we are actually actively working on, which means that you can add on top of that as well.
Yeah, definitely. I see Bart had a question there. Which subscription level do I need for DevSecOps with GitLab? You can basically start with free. There are some parts, of course, that are part from the enterprise version. Like, for example, some of our security scans. So DOS scan, for example, is part of our enterprise edition. But starting with DevSecOps and basically integrating, for example, your own security tests and stuff like that, that's totally possible with the community edition. You don't need to have a specific subscription level for that. If you ever notice that the organization needs to go more in a direction of, have those scanners available, right, without having to integrate, and again, adding those benefits on top, then you're looking more into the direction of one of the enterprise edition subscriptions there.
Agreed. And that's coming back to the devil is in the details. A couple of our scanners are based on open source scanners. There is a difference between the open source scanner and the scanner that is integrated in our ultimate tier. And the main reason there, I believe somebody hinted to that already, but I can't remember who it was, apologies for that, is you want your results to be as actionable as possible. Meaning, I think it was a question around too many false positives and needing to look at those results. Well, Ultimate gives you that framework. Ultimate gives you the way to, first of all, collect all the results in a single pane of glass and be able to act on it. And one of the new features that is incoming is automatically get rid of those results that you know that is not going to be relevant for you anyway, by building a policy around it. Yes. But even now, if you go and look at those results, you say, well, this one is a true positive. So I'm highlighting it as something that we will fix, which means you can well, create an issue for it and make time to solve it. Yeah. If the other way around, if it's a false positive or something that you can mitigate otherwise, you can highlight those there as well. It also means that the next time that you do a new merge request or you do a new scan, it will ignore the results that are already in the baseline inside of your merge request. So let's say that we have 1,000 vulnerabilities that were found in the entire project, but 2 of them are fixed and 2 of them are new. If you just have a scan, if you just have a number saying, well, where you have 1,000 findings, you don't see that it has been fixed or it has been added. What we do is we essentially do a diff between what was there, what was newly added or fixed, and only show that diff. So only those new ones that were added or those ones that are fixed are highlighted in the merge request, which is much easier to see what was going on related to the change that we're just doing. We're not getting rid of all the rest. It's still there. No. You still have the full report. But having that kind of mechanism, that actually helps in speeding up the remediation.
Totally agree. Like I asked, one of my customers basically came to us and said, like, hey, we're using this security scan, and after each of the pipelines, we want to integrate it, and we basically end up with this full report. And the full report has, of course, what they call false positives. In the end, they're not false positives, they're legacy. They have been in the application before they started doing security scans. With GitLab, we have something what we call baselining. So basically, the first time you do a security scan, you do a security scan on the main branch, and that main branch is now your baseline. And from every merge request that you create on top of that, we are then going to use that diff, what Christoph just mentioned, and only focus on that. So the developer will basically see all the vulnerabilities he or she introduced, not the old ones that are still there. So that makes it basically that the developer also sees, okay, I made a change, I broke it, I can fix it, and not be overwhelmed with potentially all the other vulnerabilities that are in there that might not be even something they can or want to fix or have to fix, right?
Yeah, indeed. And Scott is asking, does DevSecOps give a single pane of glass view? Apologies and keep the counter going, but it depends on because it depends on your scope. Yeah, depends on your scope of 8. Because if you're looking at your software development lifecycle or your DevOps lifecycle in general, for security, it does give you a single pane of glass. For the business reports, it doesn't always give you a single pane of glass because we're focused on delivering software, essentially, or delivering products in general, which includes software. However, if you are a car manufacturer, DevSecOps will give you an insight on what's happening on software, but it does not give you any insight on where your materials are coming from, where your suppliers are in delivering that's I don't know, that's steering wheel or whatever it might be. So in that case, there's no single pane of glass there. That's also why it's important to say what the scope is that you're looking at, and a true, let's call it, value stream of your entire company. You need to be able to provide input to that from your DevSecOps approach. Does that make sense, Scott?
To me, it does.
Let's hope that Scott agrees. Okay, perfect.
Great. Yeah, and Christian, you mentioned there as well. So this whole single pane of glass view is definitely something that you benefit the most of in Ultimate because we have our vulnerability management there. So having that vulnerability management allows you to manage your vulnerabilities. Who thought that? But also get that information in your merge request. So have all that information, single source of truth. Well, you'll hear that a lot of times here, but it really is, as a developer, I only need to focus on my merge request. Makes it a lot easier. I don't have to click around, go to different tools, context switching, be confused. What do I do next? Everything is in there, from approvals to vulnerabilities to the status of the pipeline to even the access to the review application if you want to quickly check the application or your application that you changed. It's all right there in that single page. Is there a capability to tie into an IDE for the fast scan results or Slack, for example? It depends, Christoph.
Totally agree. At this moment, we are working on, and I'm getting to your to the answer. At this moment, we're working on a new IDE, web IDE integration. The first iteration has been released and is available on GitLab.com already. I believe it might be behind a feature flag for self-managed, but well, don't quote me on that because we have had a release. Yeah, which is based on the Visual Studio Code editor, essentially. The next iteration, or one of the next iterations, will be remote working environments. Because we're working there to trigger the scans from that remote working environment or remote development environment, the local environment will be able to run those scans as well. But it's going to take a couple of iterations to get there. Yeah, let me see whether I can find an issue for that. But...
Yeah, and while you look for that, Christoph, and if you can find it, what I also want to mention there is fast scan results are still going to be in your merge request. So in your merge request, you will be able to see the results immediately, but also, as mentioned by Christoph before, focused on the scope of your change. So only the change you made, if there's any vulnerabilities in there, it will immediately show them there. There is ways, of course, to integrate at the moment. Christoph will look into what we are building, how we see the future, but we are an API-first application. That means that the majority, and I think it's about 80% or something, please correct me if I'm lying here, Christoph, but I think 80% of all the actions that you can do within GitLab, there is an API behind it or a GraphQL. So in that case, if you want to create an integration with Slack, we have webhooks. You can actually also set up webhooks, subscribe to different events that are happening in your application. And based on that, you can create as many integrations as you want. It will require you to do something. It's not out of the box, but yeah, there's no limits there, basically. Anything you're finding there, Christoph?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Worst case, we can follow up on it in the mail.
Yeah, we can definitely take that with us and answer them at a later point. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Yeah. The reason why, just to add on top of those fast scan results, one of the reasons why we didn't do that yet is we strongly believe that you need to push back and integrate as soon as possible so that everybody in the team is aware of what you're doing. But we do see the benefit of doing quick scans, so this is the fast scans locally before pushing, just to avoid a couple of things. Like I can imagine, for instance, a secret detection that if it is done locally, you can still contain it, and you don't need to rotate your private keys, for instance.
Yeah.
Things like that are beneficial. You can set it up manually already, but it will become an easier process.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely see it as well with SOST. I see this question come back a lot while developing the code change that I just made to basically have a local scan on that, or a light scan basically executing that. So it's definitely something that that we hear more often. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give up.
You give up, okay.
Yeah,
and we'll take it as an action item and and follow up with it afterwards. Good. Maybe we'll head off to another slide. Maybe we can talk a little bit about that as well. We already mentioned a bit about it, and it's basically, don't know if anybody is familiar with it, but let me just put a little short context around it. So this is what we call the GitLab flow. It's based on the GitHub flow, which then is based again on the Git flow. So basically, each iteration is making it easier or simpler. We believe that this is the easiest way to get started. This does not mean that this is the way you should do it. There's nothing written here in stone that this is how you must use GitLab. This is just how we believe that is the most efficient way to get started. So it's just basically starting from your default branch, starting with your issues. And once the issue is created, you're planning, you have all your tools around that. We start with feature branches, or basically short-lived feature branches that you build your changes on top of. And this is what I mentioned before, that on each commit, we want those tests to happen. So we want that shift left. And we want that shift left to be as left as possible, which means that every change you make, even if it's a 2-line code change, we want to run the full suite on top of it. All of that information comes back in the merge request. And this is again where we were talking about that single source of truth, which is basically, yeah, what we've been preaching the whole day, right, Christoph? It's basically that single platform.
Yeah, exactly. I did see that we skipped a question from Christian around adopting auto DevOps and SaaS in more projects, because it's essentially asking for more use cases and scenario in the docs that makes it easier to start adopting it. It's a fair point, and essentially to auto DevOps in general is, I call it a nice sample use case of how templating can work and the hierarchy of templating can work. That said, you can build out your own templates based on what you're doing in your company, and a similar approach to auto DevOps can be achieved according to that, because auto DevOps is essentially trying to figure out whether by looking at the source code of your repository, do we recognize something that we have built jobs for later on in the pipeline? That's essentially what auto DevOps is trying to do by applying workflow rules. If we don't support something, let's say COBOL, we don't support COBOL out of the box. You can support COBOL, that's fine. If you have a mainframe, of course, and you have reason to support COBOL, you could be doing that, but it means that you have to have the right build environment, you have to have the right target deployment environment and stuff like that. You could build that potentially, but what happens now, and which is not that easy for our community members, is that whenever you have built that, how do you promote that within your company? It's not something that you can easily do unless you have a centralized handbook and centralized way of working where everybody can take a look at. That is a functionality that we're trying to build out, and our product managers are asking for feedback and input for that. And it's something that's called the CI catalog. So that would allow you to promote, well, here, this is the template that you can use if working with COBOL, for instance, or if working with, well, fill in the blanks with Terraform according to your way of working. Because Terraform itself is supported. By default, we are using the endpoints that are built into GitLab. But there's multiple ways. You have the remotes with Terraform Enterprise, you have S3 buckets, you have a lot of things that you can do there. And so once you have specified how you work within the company, the CI catalog will allow you to promote that within the company. That's the first iteration would be within your own organization. Later, once we have a more functional stable, so by adding all the functionality that is required, we will also have a public version of it. So that we can promote things like, well, how do you do SAS scanning on a Node.js application? How do you do SAS scanning on a C# application? Stuff like that. It's possible today, but we did get the feedback that it's not always that easy to get it started with it, which is, I believe, what Christian is mentioning as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. We do have some of my customers, they basically use the Auto DevOps template to get started, as you mentioned before, Christoph, like kind of like a how do we template ourselves? And there are some ways, of course, to get those templates then made up and put into projects. And if you're using your self-managed instance, you can even put them in location and expose them to the rest of the org. There are some things that you want to keep on doing there. So we have some differentiation there between templates that you put within GitLab that you can use in the IDE or basically in the files manager and use it as a template. It's a momentum as in that version you get immediately. But most of our customers, what they're looking for is that golden template type of scenario where you have one template that is once made, and you basically iterate on top of it. So a different team iterates on the template, and the developers are basically just consumers that use it and maybe customize with some variables, but they want to keep on using basically what the other teams are iterating on top of. Is that similar how you're seeing it, Christoph?
Yeah, exactly. And that's, I think, related to, who was it again? Bart, I think, mentioned it for security scans. It's not the developer's job. Mm-hmm. I could argue that pipeline creation is not the developer's job either. Or it's not a favorite job of the developer to create those pipelines. And having like a structure like Auto DevOps is doing allows you to have like a centralized location where you can build out the components of that pipeline, while having the usual friendliness for the end users or the developers to say, well, I just want to include my pipeline, if any. Because if you use Helm-based deployments and you can leverage Auto DevOps, you can just override the way how we do that as well. So multiple ways of doing it. Yeah. Make it as easy as possible for the consumer of the pipeline.
I also saw that we skipped over a question from Radoslav regarding recommendations for scanners for IOC. Might it be IAC, as in infrastructure as code, like Terraform? I believe in that case, we have a scanner. So we basically have, as part of our SaaS scanners, we have infrastructure as code scanner available. We have mentioned a couple of times, we use open source libraries, and in this case, we use Kix. So we support Terraform, we support things like Ansible, YAML files, we support Kubernetes, definition files, basically a plethora of whatever Kix supports. But like Christoph mentioned before as well, so we use open source libraries, but it doesn't mean that we copy over the full rules that they're using. To give you an example, for example, with secret detection, with Git leaks, we don't have everything enabled because it, in our experience, has caused a lot of false positives. Basically focusing on the things that are what we believe are basically the important ones, or the ones that we believe should be actionable.
Indeed, yeah. And well, it's probably good to mention there, since we are open source ourselves, the application is open source or open core. Is essentially the core is open source, and the proprietary software is built on top of that for the premium and ultimate features. Mm-hmm. Whenever we onboard an open source tool, we also make sure to improve the upstream project, which means if Kix has some problem and we see that it's lacking some functionality potentially, or problem, then we try to submit a merge request or a pull request, depending where they're hosting it, to them as well, giving back essentially to that community there, which is a two-way direction essentially, because we also see a lot of other open source companies contributing back into GitLab essentially. So that's the power of having a community of open source engineers.
Yeah, definitely agree. And to mention also, to contribute, everybody here, if you ever see something that you would like to see changed in the open source product, open a merge request. You can make changes as well. It doesn't need to be just a GitLab engineer. Basically, everybody who wants to pick up our code and make a change or make a fix, or see, for example, a specific epic or a specific issue that we want to solve, and you think, I can do that, go ahead. We definitely are open for those merge requests, and we're very pleased to see that our customers and our users are basically contributing to our product. In the end, it's our company's mission, right? Everybody can contribute.
And each of our releases always have an MVP. It's the most valuable person of the release, which very often is not a GitLab team member. And team member is very broad. It's not an employee of GitLab. It might be one of the wider community members. I believe Patrick is one of the wider community members, if I'm not mistaken. Or it might be hired in the meantime. That's also possible.
That is also possible, yes.
Yeah.
I want to move to the next slide here and basically ask everybody here in the chat and in the attendees, who's familiar with Dora metrics?
I heard of it.
If you're familiar with it, are you using it? That's basically, are you using it to improve? Nope. Okay. So not familiar with it or not using it? I should have been a bit clearer in my question there, sorry. Okay, neither. Not familiar, not using it, not familiar, not using it. Okay, no. Familiar, not using it. Okay. And the question is, why not?
Dora, isn't that an explorer somewhere?
Yeah, exactly. Dora the Explorer. It's great TV show that I watch a lot with my godchild. Wonderful. I've learned
a lot of awkward silences in
it. Awkward silences and a lot of English that you learn from Dora the Explorer. We want to use it, but if the pricing is good for the ultimate license, okay. Well, Dora is not, well, yes, in our product, it's part of the ultimate license, but Dora, of course, goes further than just being part of GitLab, of course. Self-integrated.
Yeah. So perhaps start where the Dora 4 metrics are coming from, because there's a couple of people that are not familiar with it. So DORA stands for the DevOps Research and Assessment Institute, which is essentially the institute that has the annual DevOps survey, or State of DevOps, I believe it's called, where essentially they're questioning the entire market as much as possible with very nice questions as what kind of tools are you using, but more importantly, what is the impact and how fast are you doing things? Based on they do it since multiple years essentially, and there's a lot of science behind it, which is essentially a book called Accelerate, that explains what kind of mechanism that they're using to get to those results. And they come up with the DORA 4 metrics, and the 4 metrics essentially, which is, by the way, now a part of Google, the DevOps Research and Assessment team. 4 metrics, which is deployment frequency. So, well, how often does an organization can successfully release to production? Lead time for change, the amount of time that it takes to a commit to get into production. So from a first commit to the commit itself, how long does it take towards the production? The change failure rate, the percentage of the deployments that are causing failure in production. How many times do you deploy something which is actually working from the first time? And time to restore service. So how long does it take an organization to recover from a failure in production? So server down or service down, how long does it take until you're back up and running completely? They say that if you take those 4 metrics into account, you can start, well, lack of better word, grading the maturity of where you are. Going from deployment frequency of a couple of, well, once every couple of weeks or a couple of months even, to, well, multiple deployments on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, potentially for some. It is, well, an entire story around it, and everything depends around what you're doing, because a deployment in its own is completely different, because the definition of the deployment itself already makes you be able to do a monthly deployment versus multiple deployments on an hourly basis. And all of that essentially is in the DORA 4 metrics.
Yeah.
Now, to answer your questions around the ultimate license, since we have everything of those events in a single application, we have all the events that you need to start measuring those DORA 4 metrics, which means we can visualize that on a group basis, on an instance basis, on a project, well, not project, anyway, on all the different levels of organization. That does not mean that you can't leverage the DORA 4 metrics without having ultimate. That's another story, but it makes it easier because you have everything there. And Marcus has experience apparently, because he says impossible to get DORA from self-integrated tools. That's completely correct. It is, I wouldn't say it's impossible.
It's difficult,
but it's very difficult. I have had, and I still have some customers who've built that themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too.
It is at that particular customer, 2 people full-time working on only getting that up to date all the time, because if you have a dashboard that gets information from a single source of truth, that's already nice because you have some delay. But if you have a dashboard that needs to get information from several sources of truth that needs to be synchronized to each other, that is, well, essentially you might end up with a spaghetti of a lot of things.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I keep on waffling all the time. my colleagues call me. Anyway.
Yeah.
Did I forget anything, Lars?
So no, totally agree. Like, it's impossible. It's not impossible in my opinion. It's definitely something that would require additional resources and significant amount of resources to set up. So it could be impossible in your organization. I definitely agree. I have a customer that also has set it up. And the thing that you have there as well is that you need somebody who constantly monitors it and also make sure that the data that's coming in is accurate. Because in the beginning, they actually made, for example, a mistake in the rounding. And they ended up with a lead time of 2 milliseconds. And they go like, wow, we're really fast. In the end, it wasn't 2 milliseconds. It was a couple of weeks. It's more like 2 weeks or so. So it requires, again, there's going to be more error rates happening in your data. And what you want your data, of course, is to be accurate and to be up to date. And with a single platform, single application that we have here, we have all the data we need. And with having all that data, we can build this dashboard and basically give you the information that we believe can be very helpful in finding also bottlenecks. So we have our DORA metrics here, but we also have, for example, our value stream analytics. So you can basically build your own value stream, build your own events that you want to measure on, how long specific issues take, how long it takes from an issue to go to a merge request, et cetera, et cetera. You can build your full value stream on top of that. You can find also bottlenecks. You can, because all that information is in there, you can get a lot more information, of course, out of it. And we give you the opportunity to do that. And if it's not in a dashboard, it's through an API, because you can also have the DORA APIs. If you have Ultimate, you can use our APIs to pull the data out and build your own dashboards, for example. Christoph is posting and spamming us with links.
I'm spamming everybody because I just realized that I wasn't sharing it with the right people.
Okay, you were putting it. Yeah. Okay, now I got it. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah, you were posting it to me. Thank you.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. So yeah,
all right.
Analytics, really interesting, of course, because we have all that information available.
We still have 7 minutes remaining for the session. So I would ask, are there any other questions in Q&A or chat? Because we can continue talking all day long.
That is
but it needs to be useful for everybody listening.
Yeah, agreed.
Unless you want to start us talk about beer and chocolate and waffles.
You have two Belgians in the call, so beer and chocolate can be a very, very deep topic.
Can even combine it with the pralines.
Achel triple is no more.
We have somebody who knows.
Yeah, he's a connoisseur, like they call him.
A connoisseur, yeah.
Exactly. Expert.
Yeah, so I hope that for now the session has been okay-ish. As mentioned in the beginning, it's first time for us doing this in a less structured way. I think lessons learned from us, even less slides potentially.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, to be honest, I don't think we needed any of the slides except for the introduction, and even the introduction we probably don't even need it. But yeah, definitely. Also, if you have any questions, also just around anything DevSecOps related, please ask them. We're happy to answer them.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Scott, and to making it to the end, essentially, or almost to the end.
Tim.
And Tim, indeed, sorry.
Yep.
Bart might already be drinking something.
Yeah, he probably finished the triple and now continues with the quadruple. From the talks.
That's actually a good point, because well, I just mentioned that we have too many slides, but if you take the next slide, essentially that one that's essentially related to Christian's point, I believe, because that's the reason why we as a solution architect exist. It's to help you out on it. And just to make you aware, it's not because because a solution architect at GitLab, it's pre-sales. It doesn't mean whenever you buy something that we drop you completely. You actually have more access to more people, from the skilled CSM team to dedicated CSM, all depending on what the need is that you have. Support teams are there to help you out as well. Because I do agree that the documentation can be daunting, especially in the very beginning. That's also the reason why that CI/CD. Well, actually, did I share that correctly? The CI/CD blueprint. Nope, didn't share that correctly either. There you go. So this is the blueprint of the CI/CD pipeline components called CI/CD catalog. That helps out essentially in identifying what is available within the company. But agreed, if you start with it, you might have some assistance, and that's where we get in. Yeah. The multiple blocks that you can see here. The reason why they exist there is because we have multiple customers that start on a different level. And yes, they do exist. We do have customers that just get started with source code. Because they are used to sharing everything on a shared drive within the company. Not the best practice whatsoever, don't get me wrong, but we help them getting started with source code. Then we have other customers that already have source code management and continuous integration, but wants to add security, and then we help them out on security. So that's a lot of these things that we can help out with.
Yeah. For sure. And to be honest, also when you're looking at the security scans, we should not forget that vulnerability management is part of enterprise, but the SaaS scanner and the container scans are actually available in free as well. So you can get started with our scans. It will output a JSON file that you can then parse in any way you would like, and even build things like failure pipeline, for example, if vulnerabilities are found. Or create your own dashboard. So you don't have to have the enterprise edition to get started with security scans. We have security scans also available already in free and in premium.
Yeah, and even if you have a team that does the security scans manually, or the security tests and validation manually, you can enable the projects to have CVE requests directly from within GitLab. So that whenever you would need have a unique number from the CVE numbering authority, CNA, essentially, you can do that from within your issue and link it back directly there as well, which makes it easier. And that's the reason why we are considering ourselves a single sort of truth for, amongst other security, is because you can build on top of it. If we don't support anything, we're open source, so you can build in it, which means a slightly different approach as add-ins that you create, because add-ins you need to support and maintain yourself, while with an open source tool like ourselves, we accept it, and then whenever it's accepted, we essentially take over the maintenance for you.
Yeah.
But I'm waffling again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christoph. And I actually see we're at time right now, so I'll ask for the last time if there's any more questions. Please ask them now. I'm more than happy to answer them. And if not, then thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed it. There will be a follow-up email. We will ask for your feedback. Do please send us feedback. As we mentioned, we want to iterate over this. If there's a format that you enjoyed, let us know. If there is some criticism, also let us know. We're more than happy to iterate over it and improve, of course. Yeah, exactly. So if there's some criticism, just send it to Lars. If there's some positive feedback, just send it to me. I'm always happy to achieve. Thank you, Christoph. Thank you so much. And thank you for reminding me about Log4j. That really will make me sleep in the next 2 nights. Thanks. Bye. Thanks, everyone. Bye, everybody. And, have a great rest of your week. Yeah, thanks. Bye.